Cagney's older brother was in pre-med and studying to be a doctor. So, she thought it'd be good for his speech skills if he joined the drama club here. So back to Cagney. This came at a time when I was working there, running the switchboard, racking up pool balls, and serving as an unofficial 130-pound bouncer. Harry was duly cast in a play. He became ill suddenly, and I had to jump in for him. So this was my real introduction to acting. So, the thing about Cagney is that he was a complete New Yorker through and through. He was born on the Lower East Side, around A Street and Avenue D, in 1898 into an Irish immigrant family. His family moved up to this neighborhood. He lived in a few places right around here, so some of you might know the addresses already. The family first lived at 429 East 79th Street. They moved a little bit further uptown, lived at 166 East 96th Street. He was a student at Stuyvesant High School, also went to Columbia College. He worked at a number of jobs. There was a branch of Wanamaker's department store downtown, so he worked there. And he was just, everything you read about him just shows that he was like filled with energy. He was overly energetic. He would, in the Lower East Side, would just constantly get into street fights, often to protect his brother Harry. He was a boxer. His family also loved music. So he played music, he played the piano, he learned how to tap dance. After catching the acting bug here at Lenox Hill House, he performed in vaudeville and Broadway throughout the 1920s. And he worked his way up. He was somebody who people noticed because of this incredible energy and style that he had. And he had a few lucky breaks along the way. So there was a play that playwright Maxwell Anderson wrote called Outside Looking In. One of the main characters in the play was named Little Red. And Cagney, jumping back to his autobiography, said because there were virtually only 2 actors in New York with red hair, there wasn't much competition for the part. So he claims that he got the part because he had his hair was redder than the other actors. But his energy that he brought to his performances was very clear right away. After the first act of one of the performances in this play, Maxwell Anderson gathered up all of the actors and told them, now I want everybody here to speak twice as loud and twice as fast. You hear? Then he looked at Cagney and said, everybody that is except for you. He got another big break. So he had a few lucky breaks along the way again. And in 1929, he was cast in a Broadway show called Penny Arcade. He played a murderer, Joan Blondell, who is in this film we're about to see, played a wisecracking gal. The play was only open, it only ran on Broadway for 3 weeks. This was right during the first year of the Depression. But one of the people who went and saw the play was Al Jolson, who, of course, was one of the most famous performers of the time and had done The Jazz Singer for Warner Brothers. And Jolson was impressed both with Joan Blondell and with Jimmy Cagney. Jolson bought up the rights to the show. And on his recommendation, Warner Brothers hired Cagney, who took a train out to Hollywood, totally expecting that he was going to, he would return to New York fairly shortly. He wound up spending over 30 years there, making about 80 films. The Hollywood adaptation of Penny Arcade was called Sinner's Holiday, this is film historian Robert Sklar describing Cagney's performance, not in a starring role, but in a small role in this film, which came out, I believe, in 1930. Cagney moves with a swayback swagger, his hands and elbows high at his chest. He speaks rapidly in a high-pitched, sometimes frightened voice, appearing somewhat self-conscious in the city street lingo. He would say things like these, damn and does. He was like clearly a New York street personality. But one of the things that is really interesting that Robert Sklar points out, and I think it's good to keep in mind when we watch The Public Enemy, is that Cagney didn't just play like a pure tough guy. There was a soft side to him as well. There was a side to him that was always dependent on women in the film, particularly his mother. Very often it's his mother who he's most dependent on. So in this movie, there are scenes, a number of scenes with Cagney and his mother shot in very tight close-up. There's a final scene when Cagney is about to be taken away for a murder that he committed, and the mother and son hug, and Cagney kisses her on the mouth quickly. So there was always this side of Cagney being a boy, being a child inside a man's body in a way, and that's part of his irrepressible energy. His second film that he made is called The Doorway to Hell. It's pretty much a forgotten movie now, but it was actually the movie that kicked off the Warner Brothers cycle of crime movies. Quickly followed, just a few weeks later, after Doorway to Hell came out, a movie called Little Caesar came out, starring Edward G. Robinson. And it was just a few months later that The Public Enemy came out. Cagney had a supporting role in The Doorway to Hell, but his performance stood out. And this was partly because Cagney loved the camera and sort of hamming it up a little bit for the camera, I have to say. So this is a description again by Robert Sklar. So he's talking about Cagney, how he's sort of drawing attention to himself in this small role. Nearly every time that he appears on the screen, Cagney creates so much business as to call almost exclusive attention to himself. In one early sequence in which he is calling on gangsters to come to a conclave, he faces the camera, pulls a cigar from another gangster's pocket, ostentatiously sniffs it, and then returns it. With another gangster inside view, he busily adjusts his jacket, sticks out his chin, straightens his tie, and then supplies the topper by pulling down the other man's suspenders. So he, anyhow, he sort of knew how to be noticed. So, and in that scene, he keeps, while the star of the film is talking, we'll often see Cagney shifting his eyes and raising his eyebrows. So then a few months later comes the movie that is going to be the really big breakout film, the movie that makes Cagney a star, and that's the one that you're about to see. It was originally titled Beers and Blood, and you'll understand why when you see the film as a reference to those words. It was changed to The Public Enemy. And it's a movie that is set in Chicago, as a bunch of gangster movies were, like Scarface, which came out just a year after this. And originally Cagney, who was not a big star, he wasn't yet a star, and he was not intended originally to star as Tom Powers, who's the main character in the film. He was supposed to have a smaller role. Tom Powers was supposed to be played by an actor named Edward Woods, not the same Edward Wood who became a film director, but Edward Woods, who actually plays Cagney's sidekick in the movie. Cagney, around that time, was making a movie called The Millionaire, and he was playing a fast-talking insurance salesman, and Darryl Zanuck, who was running the studio at the time, running production for Warner Brothers, noticed Cagney's performance and noticed the energy there, and felt that Cagney should play Tom Powers. So different people have taken credit for discovering Cagney and deciding that he should take the starring role. Cagney credits the director, William Wellman, but the way studios were run in that time, it was really the studio executives, people like Darryl Zanuck, who would make that kind of decision. And one of the reasons that Cagney got the starring role was this is a real interesting period in Hollywood history where the public, Hollywood itself is in trouble, and it had really been in trouble since the Depression. The films were losing money. Hollywood was really having to struggle to figure out how to get audiences into the theaters. And one of the things that they landed on was this crime genre, because crime movies are exciting. The public is kind of drawn to criminals. So there was something very appealing. It was also a genre that really suited sound movies, which were brand new. There were sounds associated with gangster movies. machine guns and other sorts of sounds, and urban. They tended to, of course, be set in the city. So there was the sounds of city life. There was the particular flavor of city dialogue. And 1929 was the year when crime movies overtook the Western as the more popular genre. So in the whole first 30 years of movie history, the Western was the most popular genre. And now we get this very urban genre of the crime film. But Hollywood was under attack from a lot of religious groups and the government who found the movies could start getting a little bit too sensationalistic. That's why something called the production code is introduced right around this time. And there's a whole list of things that can't be shown. And one of those things was you can't show crime in a positive way. You can't have a movie where the criminal is rewarded. So this is a bit of a dilemma for Hollywood because the criminals, the gangsters, Cagney in this film, Paul Muni in Scarface, and Edward G. Robinson in Little Caesar are clearly the most, the characters that were drawn to in those movies. But they're all criminals, so they have to somehow be punished. So Cagney was, so they didn't want to put a conventional, good-looking movie star in the lead role. And Cagney, because he didn't fit that mold, was more acceptable for this part. So that's why he was one of the reasons that he got this role. So I'm just going to say a few things now about Public Enemy, and then we'll start the movie. One of the things you see at the very beginning is this text that comes on screen, saying that the movie we're about to see is meant to teach us a lesson. It is in the intention of the author as a Public Enemy to honestly depict an environment that exists today in a certain strata of American life, rather than to glorify the hoodlum or the criminal. So this Hollywood is really trying to say these are educational, these films. Like but obviously it is the energy, the excitement, and of the criminals and their behavior that draws audiences to the films. So, a New York Times review of this movie right when it came out said the audience yesterday laughed frequently and with gusto as the swaggering Matt and Tom went through their paces, and this rather took the edge off the brutal picture the producers appeared to serve up. And really what you just feel throughout this film, I think in comparison to Scarface and Little Caesar, where the motivation for both of those main characters is to get as much money as possible. You see Cagney become a successful criminal, and money starts coming to him in this film. But he just seems to act and behave because he can't help it. He's in a way like a child, and he's irrepressible. How many people have never seen this film? Raise your hand if you've never seen Public Enemy. Okay, a few. That's good. A few of you haven't. I'm not going to spoil anything by saying one of the most famous scenes in the film is when he pushes a grapefruit into his girlfriend's face, May Clark. And that scene was often described after, not at the time it came out, but later it was sort of retroactively looked back at as a very cruel scene. And I don't think the scene actually plays that cruel when you see it. I think instead you just get this feeling that Cagney's characters is out of control. And that happens a number of times in the film. And it's like another gesture. This is a small thing that is sort of a fun thing to look out for, which is an example of this. There's a gesture that he does in the film where he'll often sort of jab with his fist and sort of jab his fist into a character. It can be a partner or a guy, or his mother gets that a few times. And it's just almost sort of playful. It's sort of aggressive but playful and kind of tender at the same time. And that I think captures a lot of what this performance is all about. And just to conclude, which I'm sure you're happy to hear because you get to see the movie, I'll just read two things. One was written in 1932 by an artist and writer named Lincoln Kirstein, who wrote an essay about Cagney. And he wrote in 1932, Cagney is the first definitely metropolitan figure to become national. A short, red-headed Irishman, quick to wrath, humorous, articulate in anger, representing not a minority in action, but the action of the American majority, the semi-literate lower middle class. When Cagney gets down off a truck, or deals a hand at cards, or slaps a girl, or even when he affords himself and her the mockery of sweetness, he is, for the time being, the American hero, whom ordinary men and boys recognize as themselves. And then one more quote, which is from Dwight McDonald, the great film critic, and he wrote in 1961, this is, of course, James Cagney's picture. His performance is as great as anything I've seen in movies. His ballet-like control of his body, every movement at once precise and free, his extraordinary command of expression. His Tom Powers is a human wolf, with the heartlessness and grace and innocence of an animal, as incapable of hypocrisy as of feeling. The smiling, unreflective delight with which he commits mayhem and murder makes Humphrey Bogart look like a conscience-stricken Hamlet. Wellman uses Cagney with subtlety, keeping him in the background much of the time, while secondary characters occupy the foreground. This development of secondary characters is often a sign usually a sign of a good movie. So it's all the more powerful when Cagney moves up into the foreground at the big moments. Our taste for the extraordinary actor has not been blunted by seeing too much of him. I think you'll have fun. This is a movie that drove the censors crazy. There are a bunch of things that slip by in this film. There's a lot of innuendo, sexual references. I won't spoil the final scene. It's a shocking ending, and there were censorship boards that thought that scene should be removed from the film. So I'm glad that survived. And have fun. It's a short, snappy movie. It's like 84 minutes, so have fun. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, David, for being here and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. A couple of things just very quickly before we start the movie. If you need to make a phone call or text, please do so outside the auditorium and make sure that your phones are on silent during the film. There are also bathrooms just outside these doors, should you need to use them. Please join us tomorrow as well for Angels with Dirty Faces, a lecture